What's up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the JuicyJet Podcast. And it's been over a week now, and a lot of juicy news has built up over this past week surrounding not only the Jets, surrounding the NFL in general, and even some other sports. So we got a lot to talk about today. What I want to do is, now that we have Aaron Glenn in place, we got Darren Muji in place, let's talk a little bit about the staff that they are putting together, both on the pro and college personnel side, as well as what is Aaron Glenn doing from a coaching staff perspective. But before we get into all that, there has been a lot of interesting things going on, not only in the world of the NFL, but in the NBA as well. And it wouldn't be a Juicy Jet podcast if we didn't talk about the juiciest trade, probably in potentially sports history, that went down the other day when the Dallas Mavericks, just out of nowhere, trade away their superstar, 25 years old, probably a top four player in the NBA, Luka Doncic, to the, of course, of all teams, the Los Angeles Lakers, for Anthony Davis and a bunch of other random nothing. Shocking. No one saw this trade coming, came out of nowhere, and I'm trying to think about, first of all, is there ever been a trade that can relate to a trade like this in the NFL? And no, I don't think so. But I was also trying to think, like, how could we compare what it could look like for the Jets to make a trade like this? Like, what would that look like? And the only comparison that I could think of with a current player on the team and a superstar that could be traded here is if Joe Burrow, who is a probably top four quarterback in the NFL, definitely finished that way, was traded to the New York Jets for, maybe another legend, someone who's been around a long time but is probably towards the end of their career, Davante Adams, for example, and maybe a couple picks. That's like the only thing I can think of as like a possible scenario that could be relatable to what went down the other night. Absolutely unbelievable, completely blindsided. If I was a Mavs fan, I would be losing my mind. Obviously, they still have a good team and they're still going to compete in the NBA, hopefully in the NBA playoffs. But man, to lose a superstar who, if I was a fan, I'd be like, man, that guy should have had a statue for him one day outside of their stadium in Dallas. But man, that's brutal. So the only thing I can really think of is Joe Burrow for Davante Adams and something else. I was also trying to think back to, is there anything in Jets history that reminds me of a trade like this, as if I was a Mavs fan? And the only thing that really stood out, it wasn't a trade, but it was Darrelle Revis going to win a Super Bowl for the New England Patriots. And it's something that I try to block out of my mind because Darrelle Revis was one of my favorite players of all time. But if you remember, we've had multiple contract disputes with Darrelle Revis. We eventually decided we didn't want to pay him, and we ship him off to Tampa Bay. So we didn't trade him to the Patriots. We send him to Tampa Bay. We get, first round pick back, all that good stuff. We take D. Milner and Sheldon Richardson with those picks. So that was, D. Milner was rough. Forgot about him for a sec. But then a couple of years later, we see Darrelle Revis go back to New England, or go to New England, and unfortunately win a Super Bowl with our arch rivals, our nemesis. And Darrelle Revis is probably all around the most talented football player, probably the best pure football player the Jets have ever had on their team. And that was devastating to see him do that. And then, of course, he loops back around, comes back to the Jets, and ends his career hanging out with us for a little bit. But that was the only thing I could think of like someone who was like our guy, like one of our players, getting shipped off in what was probably still the prime of their career. I mean, Darrelle Revis really helped New England win that Super Bowl. So, just absolutely, that was brutal. I'm bringing up bad memories right now, but that was the only thing I can think of as something that has happened in Jets history that I can relate to, with someone who was in their prime going to, a team like the Lakers, which is, you either love the Lakers or they're universally hated. And that was with me with the Patriots. So that was the only thing I can think of there. In other news, we've got some NFL stuff that's going on right now. Number one, another big name player, a little bit older than Luka, but Myles Garrett has requested a trade from the Cleveland Browns. Now, there were rumors about this all offseason so far, even into the end of this previous season while the games were still going on. but we weren't sure. We didn't know if this was maybe a contract thing that he was just looking to get more money, but he actually released a statement the other day saying that he's requested a trade. It doesn't feel like it's about money. It feels like he just genuinely is getting older in his career, still dominant, wants to win. So with that, it got me thinking, like, who are some of the teams that I think would jump out and grab a guy like Myles Garrett? And you got to think this is going to cost probably 2 first-round picks and something else in order to get a guy like that. So there are a couple teams that jumped out, and I think there are some that are being universally talked about right now. Number one, I think it's got to be the Washington Commanders. Got to be a top name for Myles Garrett. I mean, you saw how far they went with a rookie quarterback. Imagine they get that defense ready and they have an actual pass rush on the outside. I think that would be incredible for that defense. So I think the Commanders are one, and they've got the money and they got the team to do it. Number two, I absolutely love the idea of the LA Chargers going after a guy like Myles Garrett. It seems like Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack are kind of in flux right now in terms of, well, Khalil Mack, it's because of his age. Joey Bosa, it's his injury history, it's his contract, all of that good stuff. So, man, that would be awesome to see him go to the Chargers and get that defense some extra juice on the edge. So I think that would be great because Myles Garrett plays. He's not someone who is hurt very often. So I think that would be amazing. As much as it pains me to say it, the Buffalo Bills are another team that should be going after a guy like him. I don't know if they'll do it, but that's someone who could take you over the edge for sure. So I'm praying that he does not go to Buffalo. That would be absolutely brutal. But if I was the GM of the Bills, you still got that window open. Josh Allen's very much in his prime. He's still young. You might as well go get him as much help as humanly possible. Those are probably the top three. Green Bay was another one I thought about, but they're not really big into making huge trades for players or anything like that. So we'll see if that name pops up. Other than that, there's a couple others that float around. You can look at all the teams that have a lot of money, but is he going to want to go to a place like New England? No, they're not going to win this year. Is he going to want to go to the Giants, places like that? No, of course not. So, yeah, I think those are probably the top 3 or 4 that you can look at for a Myles Garrett. Now, the other big name that is potentially getting traded over the next few weeks is Cooper Kupp. Cooper Kupp, though, much older. Injuries are starting to get to him. He's expensive. He's coming down to the end of his career here. But I do think he's a solid 2-3 option for one of these top teams. You can look at, once again, the Chargers is another option for a guy like him. Might be a little too old for what they're looking for, what Harbaugh's looking for, but I think he could be an option there. You got to look at some of these other teams that are kind of just missing that extra weapon. Maybe you look at a Denver. Maybe you look at Houston. Buffalo is another option. So there's some teams out there that could use him. It's just going to be depend on how much it costs and what that contract is going to look like, whether they redo it, who pays what, all of that good stuff. So that was another interesting one that was out there. And wow, as I'm sitting here, Jimmy Butler just goes to, wow, yep, he gets traded to the Golden State Warriors. NBA, at least the NBA is keeping us excited while we're waiting for the draft, the Super Bowl, all of that good stuff. Speaking of the Super Bowl, we'll probably do another episode leading up to the Super Bowl before that. But let's focus on the Jets for this one. So now, let's get into the nitty-gritty of the point of this podcast is both Darren Muji, Aaron Glenn starting to put together their staffs. So let's talk about on the pro personnel side and the football administration side. Darren Muji, there's been a couple departures that I think are really interesting. Our co-director of player personnel, Greg, I have no idea how to say his last name. I think it's Nejma. He's been with the team for 16 years, and we haven't made the playoffs in 14 years. So in my mind, we are a loser organization. We need to flush out everybody who's been a part of this disastrous stretch of no playoffs. So, Greg, thank you for your service, but bon voyage. David Sochi, another one, Senior Director of Football Administration. He was the one who was negotiating all of our contracts since 2018. He's also gone. So Darren Muji is wiping people out. And then our strength and conditioning coach, another one, wiped out. Now, one thing that's been interesting that came up today is Muji actually brought in a guy named Robert Patton, who comes from the Denver Broncos as he's going to be our new co-director of player personnel. He was a national scout out in Denver, so obviously he was close with Muji. So I think it's it's cool to start to see who are some of the connections that both of these guys have, both Aaron Glenn and Darren Muji, and who are they going to start bringing in to help. Um, so that's going to be a really interesting thing to continue to watch, especially now. The Senior Bowl just happened. We've got the Combine coming up. The draft isn't too far away. So who are we going to retain for the time being? Because we need bodies to actually help scout and set us up for this draft coming up. And who are some of the new people that we're going to bring in? So that's it on the Muji side. Now let's talk about some of the stuff that I think is a little bit more important right now, which is the coaching staff changes. Number one, obviously Robert Saleh out the door, goes to back to San Francisco as their defensive coordinator. Jeff Ulbrich out the door as interim head coach, goes back to Atlanta as their defensive coordinator. So both are gone, are goners. I would say from another perspective, a couple other people who are gone who I think are of note. Keith Carter. I don't know a single Jets fan who was happy with Keith Carter. For those of you who don't know, Keith Carter was our offensive line coach. He gets dragged through the mud consistently by former players who have played for him. If you look at his time with the Titans, I don't know many of those outspoken players that liked playing for him. You look at a guy like Mekhi Becton, who has said some things about Keith Carter, and now Mekhi Becton's playing in the Super Bowl with the Philadelphia Eagles. So Keith Carter, bon voyage. We got too many injuries under you. It just wasn't working out. So he's out of here. Brant Boyer, our special teams coordinator, he actually also goes with Robert Saleh to San Francisco to coach special teams there. Todd Downing, who was our play caller with Hackett when Hackett got demoted, he actually goes to New England to go reunite with Mike Vrabel. Now that Vrabel is the coach in New England. So Todd Downing, I thought you did okay with us, but bon voyage. And then finally, we actually kept a coach, which I'm pretty excited about, is Sean Jefferson. Sean Jefferson, wide receiver coach, used to play. He's actually coached with the Jets this is now his third regime. He's coached with us. He was here, I think, with Adam, I believe it was with Adam Gase. He left. He just came back last year with Robert Saleh, and now he's sticking around again with Aaron Glenn. So excited to have him back. Some good continuity with a guy like Garrett Wilson. So those are some of the folks that have departed. Now let's talk about some of the people who are here. I think the most important hire that Aaron Glenn had to make was the offensive coordinator hire. And he brings in a guy named Tanner Engstrand. Engstrand was the passing game coordinator for the Detroit Lions, where, that's where he worked with Aaron Glenn and got close with him. He's very interesting. He spent a lot of time at San Diego, where he actually was a quarterback with Darren Muji and Kevin O'Connell. So it seems like we're just bringing back the Kevin O'Connell vibes from college. So that's really interesting. The problem with him, though, is the last time he called plays is when he was in college. So it's been a few years, and he's going to be a first-time NFL play caller. That scares me. I'm very excited that he's from the Lions. There's a lot of potential, but the floor is also very low. So it's one that he needs someone that's more experienced to help him out, because I don't know if I trust a brand new offensive coordinator who has not called plays in the NFL before to come in paired with a defensive-minded first-time head coach. So it's a risky hire. Like I said, I like where he comes from, but once again, we don't know until we see it. We're not sure. Plenty of first-time offensive coordinators have worked out, and then we personally have seen ourselves that plenty of first-time offensive coordinators have not. So it's going to be really interesting to see what that looks like with Tanner Engstrand. So we'll see how that goes. For defensive coordinator, this was one that we were talking about pretty much the entire time, and we knew it was going to happen. It was Steve Wilks. Steve Wilks has been around the NFL for a really long time. He was defensive coordinator for the 49ers just a few years ago. He was head coach for the Arizona Cardinals, where, he kind of got the short end of the stick there, where they put him in a bad spot, where they drafted Josh Rosen, then they kicked him out because they couldn't develop him after only 1 year. And then he was also the interim head coach for the Carolina Panthers. So he has a lot of experience. He's also going to allow Aaron Glenn to focus on coaching, while Steve Wilks can actually call the plays for the defense. I think he's going to do some great things for guys like Will McDonald, for Jermaine Johnson. He's going to be more aggressive and blitz a lot. So I think if you look at the Williams brothers, both Quinnen and Quincy, I think they're going to be very active. So I'm excited to see how aggressive we get. A lot more blitzing with a guy like Steve Wilks. So very excited about him. Um, so yeah, he should be kind of like our senior member in the room here, where Aaron Glenn could probably lean a little bit more on the offensive side, while Steve Wilks controls the defense. Now, another big hire is our special teams coordinator. We haven't had a new one in a while because Brant Boyer was here for like 10 years, which is absolutely insane. That guy lasted through 14 years of no playoffs. But Chris Banjo comes on to be our special teams coordinator. Name might sound familiar. He is actually a former player. He was recently playing with the Broncos. He played with the New Orleans Saints, which is where he came across Aaron Glenn. But for him, once again, never been a special teams coordinator before. He was the assistant coach, special teams coach with the Denver Broncos under our old buddy Mike Westhoff, who is a Jets legend. But once again, he's young. He just played, so I'm excited that he's a former player. But he's never actually done the job of owning the special teams room. The good news is Mike Westhoff says he's going to come into training camp and some of the offseason stuff that we got going on to help out. So I think that's good to see that he's going to have, a mentor, but it's going to be his show when it comes time for the season to start. So Chris Banjo, another one. High ceiling, low floor. So we'll see how it goes. Then a couple other names that I want to throw out there. Aaron Curry might be a name that football fans remember. He was I think he was the number 4 overall pick in the 2009 draft, and he went on to be one of the bigger linebacker busts in draft history. But once he realized that playing wasn't his thing, he went into coaching, and he learned under Mike Tomlin. He was the inside linebackers coach for the Steelers. So I like the fact that he was in an organization that's a winning organization and has learned under a guy like Tomlin, who's a defensive-minded coach. So interested to see how he does with a guy like, Quincy Williams, and maybe we bring back a Jamie Sherwood, fingers crossed, to help that linebacker group. So Aaron Curry, another interesting one. Then another former player, Chris Harris, you might remember as the former cornerback who has played on a few teams, I think most notably the Broncos. So he's a more recent coach as well. He is going to be our secondary coach, so he's going to be coaching Sauce Gardner, Quantez Stiggers, Michael Carter, all those folks. He was recently the secondary coach with the Tennessee Titans, so excited to see what he can bring. As you can see, Aaron Glenn is really building a staff of folks who have done it before. They've been players, so I think the players are really going to relate to some of these coaches. The big question is, can they lead? Can they be coordinators? Can they run a room? All of those big things. So we'll see how that goes. And then we got Steve Hyden. He's going to be our new offensive line coach. He actually played for 11 years in the NFL as a tight end, which is another thing that scares me. He was tight ends coach for the Arizona Cardinals, yet we're bringing him over as an offensive line coach. It scares me that we bring over a guy who hasn't coached the offensive line to be our offensive line coach. And we have had so many problems with the offensive line in the past that this doesn't sit with me. I don't feel comfortable that we have the greatest coach for the offensive line we've got. But once again, he's connected with the Lions. He's connected with Aaron Glenn. We'll see how it goes. This one I'm a little bit lower on, but anything to replace Keith Carter, I'm excited about. Then we go to Charles London. Charles London's going to be our quarterbacks coach. We have no idea who our quarterbacks are going to be. We're probably going to have to draft a quarterback in the next 2 years because we don't know if Aaron Rodgers is coming back. Tyrod Taylor will take the reins if he doesn't, and we don't have anybody else, essentially. He's been around the block a little bit. He's a little bit on the older side in terms of experience as a coach. He was with the Bears, the Texans, the Titans. He was pass game coordinator, quarterbacks coach. So he's done the job before. He seems like one of the more senior guys in the room, so hopefully he can help out Tanner Engstrand. But another one that I'm not, when I see Chicago Bears, Texans, and Titans, I'm not super excited about the quarterbacks that he's helped out. So yeah, another one. We will see how it goes. Now the final one we'll talk about, this one is probably one that people will remember. This is Scott Turner, who's our passing game coordinator. He is actually the son of former NFL head coach Norv Turner. So this one runs in the bloodlines. He was previously with the Commanders. I think it was 2 years ago he was with the Commanders, so it wasn't his previous year, but he's another one that's going to be a compliment to Tanner Engstrand because he's done it before. So I hope this isn't our big senior hire that we're going to make. I'm hoping we get a former head coach in here, like Todd Haley or someone like that to help out our offense, but it's good that we have people in the room that can help Tanner Engstrand get started. So that's it. Those are the coaches. That's the coaching staff. A lot of changes over the past couple of days. There's going to be a lot more coming up, so we aren't done yet, and we'll see how it goes. We've got, like I said, the Senior Bowl just happened. Unfortunately, we couldn't get everybody there. Like I think Muji was still building out his staff at the time, but we've got the Combine coming up, so I'm interested to see if Aaron Glenn goes to the Combine. All he has to do is show up because Robert Saleh wouldn't, which is insane that he wouldn't show up to a very important part of your job. So yeah, so we got a lot happening over the next couple of weeks. It's going to be visits. There's going to be pro days. There's going to be the draft. And then, of course, free agency is coming as well. Now, the final thing, while we were sitting here, I thought of another what-if kind of trade. And I think the one trade that would devastate me, as if I was a Mavs fan trading away Luka, is if the Jets traded away Garrett Wilson for almost nothing. That's probably the one that's most relatable in terms of if you let Garrett Wilson go, a guy who's homegrown, working his butt off. He's had 80-plus catches in 3 straight years. He's had 1,000 yards in 3 straight years with like 9 different quarterbacks. That's the one that would piss Jets fans off. So hopefully, I know Garrett has been unhappy, but hopefully we can get Muji to sit him down, get him in a room, and say, look, we want to extend you now because we feel like you are a cornerstone of this football team, and we want you to grow with the changing culture and the future success that we're going to have, the sustained success, which they both talked about. So I think that's the one that stands out to me. Don't trade Garrett Wilson. That would just be devastating. He's the one player that everyone wants to root for right now on this football team. So with that, that is another episode of the JuicyJet Podcast. We will have future episodes coming up. We'll do one on the Super Bowl. We'll have a couple on free agency. We've got the draft coming up, reactions to any other trades and moves that are coming over the next couple of days, and then any new folks that we bring on to our coaching staff or front office. So with that, thank you all for listening. Hope you have a great rest of the week. And we'll talk to you before the Super Bowl. See ya.